So you, just like me, might be what my pops are going to be in a few days, and that is starved. In this case, starved for Victoria 3 content, and so lacking any sort of new gameplay, and everything feeling slow and just really anticipating the game release on the 25th, I've decided to read through some of the newer AARs, and today we're going to be looking at New England, which is not playable at the start. Last time we looked at Iraq, which is also not playable at the start, so it looks like they're releasing nations and playing as the release nation, which is an interesting sort of thing, and is also an interesting kind of option, I think, to try and play at the beginning. You know, I saw someone on Reddit complaining about not being able to play Poland. I assume you can just release Poland as Russia, and so this might be a new way of thinking about how we're going to play our first run through. I'm planning on doing a Tunis run, and so that's kind of what I've been thinking about a lot, trying to reform Carthage. But let's take a look at New England and the absolute calamity that is going to be their market at the start, because they just ejected themselves. Following the misunderstanding during a dispute about the pronunciation of the word "cahowder," New England has been ejected from the Union. Okay, sounds good. And our expulsion being so immediate, the market is in chaos. So this is what happens when you do this, and it looks like input good shortages and it looks like almost everything. Well, let's take a look at these input goods shortages. Tools, that could be everything. Sugar, I think that's alcohol. Ammunition, small arms artillery. I'm guessing there's a lot of barracks in New England then. Grain, also used for alcohol canning, this type of stuff. Fabric, it's used in a lot of things. Paper is used in government administration, as well as universities. Dye is used in clothiers, maybe something else as well. Coal, I don't know all the stuff coal is used in. Lead is used in some of the glass making, and fertilizer used for making explosives. So he's got some problems, and they're not just small problems, they're huge problems, because there's like one tier is, you know, something just being insanely expensive, and then shortage is the next tier, which is a huge problem. Because it isn't, why isn't New York part of New England? Because it isn't part of New England. That seems like a good response. So a lot of economic micro that you have to do before you even pause. I'm guessing I'm going to have to spend 20 minutes before my first unpause. And so many problems. We're no longer in the U.S. market, which makes things a whole lot harder. Playing as New England in the U.S. Market is really easy. I don't think you can play as New England as the U.S. market. I think that when you release, you are no longer part of the market. And the plan is to get immigrants. I think this is actually, getting immigrants is an interesting strategy. I talked about this in the Iraq video. But if you are part of a market of a larger nation, and you can pass liberal reforms, you can actually sap out all of their people. And so this might be a tool, either joining a market of someone else, or, you know, just starting in someone else's market and trying to sap out their pops. And they want to do this. So this seems to be what they are playtesting right now, is doing these weird, wonky type of market correction things, and seeing if they can correct. That's not a very productive iron mine. And so how much of this is lacking the actual industries you need, like tools, and how much of it is blah, blah, blah. It's a bit of both. So they need to make some coal. How does iron have supply issues while at the same time being, I guess, unprofitable? And the answer is nobody is using it, and the input goods don't exist. I don't know. Okay. No tooling workshops. Yeah, it looks like this is just a massive explosion. I'm going to kind of scroll through this a little bit as a result of what's going on. A bunch of people are radicalizing. I wonder why. In the course of making adjustments to the economy, I fired a bunch of people who no longer have a high opinion of the government. Okay, that makes sense. And then... Yeah, so the real problem is like everything they have requires tools, and they don't have tools. Why doesn't he just import tools from the United States? This would make some sense. Because so he probably like doesn't have wood to make tools, because his production method is sawmills, which require tools, so he could downgrade his production method and try and get stuff starting, but we're not looking to be totally self-sufficient, so it sounds like he's going to import stuff. He's importing fabric from the United States. Also need paper to run government administrations. There we go. Construction, of course, is expensive if both timber... Well, I don't think timber was one of the things he was not having a lot of, but fabric. If fabric's expensive... Oh, timber is... Yeah, he's got a shortage in both. And so this is a bit interesting, seeing like just the way that his economy just starts absolutely imploded. And so he's got to try and source these stuff, both the fabric and the timber. And people are continuing to radicalize. I don't know how liberal you start out as in New England, and if this is perhaps going to make it easier for him to reform, we'll see. The president is a member of the Intelligentsia, so that's a pretty good look for, trying to. But it looks like Industrialists is in the government, so he's probably going to have to put the Intelligentsia in the government. Let's go to the next page. I thought I could hold out until the tooling workshop is done, but it looks like the economy's collapsing. He needs to import wood from the French. Something I thought of earlier is if you're trying to industrialize, some of the baser inputs, it might be the case that you just really want to import them, take off the import tariff, and try and just drive the price of the good down as much as possible, and have those industries not be very profitable, but try and have the industries which use them as an input be profitable. So now he's importing a whole lot of fabric and a whole lot of wood. These are also pretty big numbers, it looks like. So the economy of New England is relatively large, which is one of the reasons why he just implodes at the start. He's got a ton of expenses. Let's take a look. Construction goods, government wages, military wages, interest. Ooh. In the debt. Notably, the interest gets paid to the pops who are lending money, which are the places that have money stored up in them, all the buildings, the production buildings, and so those pops are getting richer, so it's not completely bad to be paying interest. Need to levy a consumption tax. I think that's probably what you almost want to do at the start, but he lacks the authority to tax grain. So New England, I'm guessing, does not start very authoritarian if he doesn't have enough authority to tax grain, because the more authoritarian your government, the more of I forget what this mana or it's not mana, whatever this resource is called. It might be authority. But the more you have of it, the easier it is. Let's take a look. So he would get 1.5k from fish, 1.3k from liquor, 1.2k from clothes, 1,000 from services. I'm just looking through this kind of quick to try and see what would generate the most money and trying to extrapolate out what the economy looks like. 600 from groceries, 500 from fabric, 390 from glass, 330 from wood. Even though there's a ton of wood being consumed, which is interesting. So it looks at it's mostly going to be pops consumption for this thing. Luxury clothes 200, tea 200, meat 120, oil 70, luxury furniture 56, porcelain 56, and tobacco 50. It seems in general you want to do the sin taxes and you want to tax stuff that is luxury goods. So that is what I've gathered from watching a lot of these playthroughs that have already happened in the AARs. So now tooling workshops completed and logging camps can use tools again. And he magically goes into the green. So just a little bit of fixing. Interestingly enough, when you tank someone's economy, for example, let's say you decide to specialize in tools and you're exporting to a bunch of countries, and then you just turn off the faucet and you embargo them. What happened to this guy at the start of the game is probably going to be what happens to that country then, and they will rush to build the industries to fill the gaps when you embargo them. And so it's not I don't think you can permanently tank an economy. You just can really put the screws in at an opportune moment. So for example, exporting military goods to a potential enemy, and then embargoing them right as you declare war with them is a good way to just tank their economy, um, you know, which will lower the standard of living, increasing radicals, making it so that they capitulate faster. It's not like a permanent screwing over, just a very temporary shafting. He's going to build more stuff, bureaucracy deficit. It's interesting that a bureaucracy surplus allows you to pass laws faster. I think this is interesting. I don't know if I don't know what the values look like, or if the values are such that like it would make sense to build up more bureaucracy than you need just to pass stuff faster. It also makes sure you're getting enough taxes through. 2.2 million pops in the States, which is interesting to note, in New England, which seems like quite a lot of pops. Japan does 30 million, but they were released from the U.S. I wonder how often the United States will just try and reincorporate them. No colonial affairs, trying to end colonialism. I'm not sure why they're doing that. Isn't that likely to exceed, but no intention of... But why? I don't understand why he wants to pass it. I'm not sure why he wants no colonial affairs. That's a bemusement for me. Maybe that just makes... It looks like it might make the petite bourgeoisie as well as the work reform people happier, I guess. Okay. Maybe that's like good long term. There's not been a lot of games I've seen go into late game, and maybe this is one where he can try and pass. It doesn't really make anyone that upset, and so he's just going for it. Use the tools to make the iron mines more productive, and use the iron to make more tools. Yeah, this like circular reinforcement seems to be come up quite a bit in Vicky, and I think tools might actually be the best good to focus on early to try and pull the rug out from people, both tools and weapons manufacturing, more than any other. Because, like, for example, if you do like furniture and then you pull it out from people, you just make the pops pissed. You don't just shaft entire like production lines. I suppose pulling like wood and iron out from under people would also like be painful, but I think those are a lot harder to control a large share of other nations' like consumption. And now no longer importing French lumber. Sacre bleu. Exporting clippers. Notably, he's pushing the clippers export. So if you look right here, this means that he is not tariffing any exporting good, which will make all of his native clippers industries more profitable because it drives the price up. I think this is going to be, these buttons are going to be somewhat important early on, or important to understand when you're trying to do with them. For example, fabric. He's importing a lot of fabric and he's not tariffing it. If he was tariffing it, he would accumulate more gold. So it's not just about having gold, it's about thinking about what price you want things to be at. Because when the fabric is cheap, what this does, by not having a tariff on it, is it drives the price of fabric down. When the fabric is cheap, then all of the industries that use fabric as an input will become more profitable and more competitive. So, for example, if he is making clothes and exporting clothes, the clothing industries will be more efficient or more productive because the fabric is cheaper, the input good is cheaper, so that means their margins are going to look better. In particular, I think this is important to think about with like the base level inputs, specifically fabric, because the cotton plantations are owned by the landowners, right? And if you want to make the landowners weaker, you want them to make less money. And so if you push down the price of fabric, they will make less money. And so it's coming at it from a lot of angles where you're not making money on the fabric because you're not tariffing the fabric, but you're making money at a different end, like when you're exporting the finished goods. And so you're thinking about which pops you want to get the money, not just like, how do I get the money? Because having the money circulate in your economy is good, and pulling it out to give to you to do more construction, it's also good. And you have to think about which good is more important, because in this case, you're pulling the money out of the treasury, effectively, to subsidize the importation of fabric because you're not tariffing it coming in. But instead what you're doing is you're putting more money into your economy because everything that is produced with fabric is more productive. And so those more productive pops now have more to spend, and they spend more money in your economy with consumption, and it just drives the entire economy. And so it's a stimulus. Okay, paper's expensive, and he wants to invest in paper mills because he's got a lot more lumber, and he's struggling to keep it affordable, even though he's importing it from, it looks like, I think this 3 means from 3 countries. And then investment pool. Iron mines, looking productive. Cash reserves go brrr, grrr. Alright, and then this is just not going anywhere. I don't know why he's trying to enact this. So it has support from the rural folk, so he's trying to make rural folk happier with this one, I guess, because you could just not colonize. I think I'm still at a bit of a loss for what part of the game mechanic makes it so that he wants to do this. There's no source of sulfur. That sucks. Liberals win again, and he's giving up on the colonial laws. There's not a lot of laws we can pass since the whole country is a powder keg. Trying to even pass mildly unpopular law would make one or more of the IGs revolt. This might be because America's both a mixing pot and because he had a bunch of radicalism spark up at the start because of the economy was like insane. But more money and more bureaucracy. Cool. Next page. Doubled the size of the construction center. That sounds like a lot. And so this is going to be one of the tensions early game, is how big do you want to make your construction center? And I don't really know the best way to approach this. So your treasury needs to take more money in order to fund the construction, and you can tax your pops more and do stuff like not removing the import tariff. So for example, he doesn't have a tariff on fabric for importing fabric. If he put that tariff on, he would take in more money, which would mean he could do more construction. And the construction industry also stimulate the economy because they employ pops, and those pops consume goods. And so it's like, it's trying to figure out the best way to do things, because everything stimulates the economy, and how do you get the most stimmy for the least buck? And I'm not sure. I think you just don't want to have... I think the way to do it might be to diversify construction centers in a few different areas, and then turn up their production or down, and just try and run kind of a neutral balance. In a general sense, that might be what you're trying to do. Or maybe you run a deficit early. I don't know. I don't know how to approach that, like having not played the game yet. Standard of living's not so good. Oh, poor England. That's probably why the pops are bad, because the standard of living went down at the start because of all the inefficiency. Do construction sectors also benefit from economies of scale? Yes. So this is one of the things that is like also difficult is if you put construction centers in different not provinces, states, what you can do is you can fiddle around with their production method and kick them up to a higher production method, and kick them back down in order to sort of micromanage how much construction you're doing. But you need to put them in different states in order to do this. If you put them all in one state, though, you benefit from economies of scale. So, I don't know what's best to do. States with construction centers in them also get bonus to local construction. It might be the case that you want to build super tall in one state, but I don't know. I think that one of the migration pulls, though, is how much arable land is there relative to how much arable land is used, and so they will migrate more towards areas with not a lot of used arable land, and they tend not to like overpopulation. I was reading something about that. I think I got to double check on that, though. Not 100%. If you know, feel free to put it in the comments. What are the things that affect migration? Construction is pretty high. Started taxing liquor. Price of liquor is at an all-time low. So you input the tax, and then the price drops because the demand drops. I love how everything's connected. Um, and a drop in radicals. Interesting. Oh, because the pops could buy it easier? I guess. Or maybe he did something else to lower the market, lower the price. Oh, he started inputting. Okay, he started importing sugar, which drove down the price of liquor, which drove down the radicals. Okay, only took us 7 years to stabilize. Wow, it's been a time. Now he wants to produce something to make and sell in large quantities because I think that so you get a throughput of 1% for every time you stack an additional building, and so this effect is like multiplicative, right? Where the second level you build in a place, now you're getting 2%, or yeah, a 2% bonus. Or I think it's you just get. I'm not sure how the math starts, if it starts at 1 or if it starts at 0. But let's say the second building, you now have a 1% bonus. So you earn a total of a 2% bonus, right? It's a 1% bonus on each building. Then when you build the third building, so your third clothier in a single place, now you get 2% from the marginal unit, the third unit, and your other two also go up by 1%. So now you're getting 4% bonus total from the one additional building because you're boosting all your current buildings and your newest building comes in more efficient. And by the time you get to the 20th one or the 21st building, which is where it's capped at, you know, it's grown quite a bit. So I really think specialization is important. But the problem with specialization is it's also better for you to have your own market controlling to have goods produced in your own market, and you can't produce both everything and also specialize. And so it's interesting to think about how you're trying to manage this. One thing you can do is you can import a lot of something, but that leaves you vulnerable. In the case of this AAR, they are importing a ton of fabric from America. Alright, people want tools and we make a lot of them. One potential downside is the impact of tools within our own market. They can be a major government expense if the price rises too high. So what he is talking about is he wants to make tools and export them, but if he takes away the export tariff and exports the tools, that'll make the price of tools go up, which makes his own costs higher. A lot of states have this modifier, increased hardwood output. So this might be a good way of deciding how you do it. So perhaps New England could be a global supplier of warships. Okay, so this is a good way of thinking about it too. He has a bonus to hardwood, and he can have perhaps some of the cheapest hardwood available, and then he's going to use it to construct ships, and then he's going to export the ships. 2 sets of shipyards, 1 military shipyard. Okay, I didn't know this. This is interesting. So you can have shipyards either produce clippers or produce military units. That's interesting. Oh. I think you can have them either produce only clippers or produce clippers and military units. Maybe that's it? And that's what this cross-out is no warships, only clippers? And maybe you can set the clippers one to no clippers as well. Oh, I was mistaken. You don't actually need hardwood to make man-o-wars. Rip the dream. Okay. But furniture manufacturers, it looks like the non-luxury furniture uses softwood and the luxury uses hardwood. So this seems like where he's going to go with this. Instead of ships, fancy chairs. And he needs to export. And then normal chairs, shortage, he's going to upgrade to lathes. It looks like. Which, does that make it so he's making... No, so he's going to have to split his production in two different states. One thing this, like, is concerning, though, is you can... It looks like you cannot bifurcate what one state is doing, just say, like, half the buildings in the state go one way and half go the other. So if you only have a one-state country, you might have problems. Also, it makes it so that building your factories wide and foregoing the economies of scale bonus gives you more flexibility, which is perhaps like a trade-off, so it's interesting. And he notes that he has a lot of tools, so using the production method that basically just adds tools to the mix is probably a good way to go. And the Liberals don't win. Instead, there's a landslide victory for the Free Trade Party. And Industrialists. And the Landowners are unhappy. Notably pretty weak. A lot of playthroughs I've seen the Landowners start strong. If you're trying to liberalize, they seem like a pretty big impediment. And so I think for a lot of countries, or a lot of the ones I am more interested in playing, that's going to be like one of the things you're trying to do, is weaken the Landowners. And again, we're back to this screen, which I think is going to be quite important, where he is charging no tariffs so that he can export his furniture, which does two things. One, it makes it so he can export a higher quantity, and this exporting of a higher quantity drives the internal price of chairs up. So instead of the money going to him in the form of the tariff, the money is going to the manufactories inside of his country in the form of, higher wages and greater, dividends for the pops that own the building. And so if he's trying to build up tall, just more and more goods is more important than necessarily being able to tariff it out. And that is the bottom of this page. Alright. These are the men who make the manufacturers who make the chairs. I think he's trying to show off that they are especially affluent, although there isn't a context here. And this is part of what removing the export tariff is going to do, is going to make these guys a lot more money. Net income, that looks like a lot. Interest groups from the chair making is Intelligentsia and Industrialists. Oh, they still have slavery. Nobody supports it, and there aren't any slaves in the country, so they can pretty easily just ban that. Why didn't he do that instead of the... I still can't wrap my head around why he was trying to change his colonial laws, because I think... Well, I just gotta get in game and take a look, I guess. Within a few weeks, they got even richer, so let's take a look. So they have 1.4k in total, affluence of 39, and now they're 42. Man, getting richer and richer. This is funny. Ironically, they're using a lot of the wealth they gained from making luxury chairs to buy luxury chairs. Interesting. Seems a little weird that the landowners lose pro-slavery ideology upon adopting something, is the question. The IG loses its ideology, but the characters retain the ideology, so there's a lingering sentiment to bring it back for a while. So that's kind of interesting to note. When you pass a law, there will be lingering support. And now reaching infrastructure capacity. So this is kind of an interesting mechanic that I think it makes it so that building tall is less good, and that you have to switch to railroads. So instead of just building up 21 furniture manufacturers in one state, this guy's got to spread them around or figure something else out. We're going to need to think about a railway network. Yeah. Although it seems like you could build really tall on your capital and then build a railway network. My understanding is that the railway network can only benefit you as much as it has a straight, as many levels as it has in line to the capital. So, for example, if you have a faraway province and it's level 3, but there's provinces in between that and the capital that are only level 2, it'll only benefit for like level 2, which means you probably want to build really high and tall in your capital, and that having your capital should have the highest railway network. Doesn't have any coal, has a lot of iron, and he's trying to get everything together. Can trains run on whale oil? Alas, not. He has one barracks and one thing of armormen. French demand that they become a protectorate. This is interesting. It's also, I think, interesting to think, because I think it'll put him inside the French market, which might even allow him to sell more chairs. So that is interesting, but I think he wants to go it alone as part of whatever it is he's testing for this playthrough that involved him wanting to release New England from the USA to begin with, which is an interesting type of run, but yeah. It's rather this is rather tempting. It would remove all the tariffs on American goods, allowing us to normalize prices between our markets. The downside is that the same would apply to them, allowing them to take all of our fancy chairs without paying any tariffs. So they want to enter a trade agreement. They are importing a ton of fabric. I guess you have to look at how much fabric it is. I think that you generally, when you're trying to analyze if you want a trade agreement, the first thing to think about is you'll have better diplo relations with people you have a trade agreement with. I don't know how big a fact this is, but this is maybe such that this is a primary area of focus, probably more important when you're a smaller nation. But the second thing is that I think you want to, if you are importing more than you're exporting, you want a trade agreement. If you're exporting more than you're importing, you don't want the trade agreement. But if you are exporting goods that you have removed the export tariff on, then you want the trade agreement again. So, like, for example, he removed the tariff, or the trade tariff, the exporting tariff, on the luxury furniture to the French. So what it would happen is it would just end the tariff. So if he has the same with the United States, it would just end the import tariff from the United States, because he already doesn't have an export tariff. And so this would allow him to export more chairs, which would, I think the price of chairs overall goes down, though. I'm not sure exactly how that would work, because from the consumer end, the chairs would be cheaper. So they would buy more chairs at a cheaper rate. But if he's already importing fabric and does not have an import tariff, and so what right now is happening is that his inputs are paying the export tariff on the fabric that the United States has, and if you accept, you don't have to go with this anymore. And so, yeah, I think that's the way to think about it, is if you are exporting a lot to a country and you don't have the export tariffs turned off for the goods, you don't want a trade agreement. And if you're importing a lot, and especially if you have the import tariffs turned off, you do want a trade agreement. So I'm guessing he says yes. He declines. Boo-hoo. And he gets gas streetlights. So this is interesting use for coal. And electricity down the line. It's interesting. Haven't seen anything from like the back third of the game. All of it's just been early on, so it's difficult to try and project and think about what the late game looks like. So I didn't see it. These are the pops that are getting. I assume he's showing that they're getting richer. I didn't see the number. I'm guessing it's like 45? Oh, 57. Jeez. Those are some rich boys relative to where they were before. And this is, I think that what you want to try and do is you really want to try and enrich the pops who you want to be powerful. And for a lot of runs, this means paying attention to like what the landowners own. Because I think generally if you're trying to liberalize, you don't like them. They're spending 1/3 of their income on the chairs that they manufacture. That's funny. And we've reached the bottom, and he is reaching railroads. So we got 2 more pages left, or 3 more pages rather. Large numbers of African Americans have begun migrating to the state of Washington and surrounding territories. We have slavery laws banned. But he doesn't own Washington. I'm confused. Oh, does he own... It's not Washington as in the United States state of Washington, but the Washington state of Victoria state of Washington. Okay. Um, yeah, so this is an interesting. I think migration hasn't been covered a lot, and I think it's not something that's happens a lot in the early game before you start passing reforms. But it might be a way to try and play tall, even as like a small state, like maybe even a Prussian minor, if you like liberalize a lot relative to the area around you. Specifically, maybe near Austria, because I know they have a lot of conflicting pops. And maybe you can even do like a Balkan start, where you start as Austria and release some other nation. Because they're showing that you can play as a released country if you want to play as a specific country that's just not on the map. But, you know, like as the UK, you might even be able to release like Scotland, for example. It would be a little interesting to see. Let's see. Standard of living, not so good, except for the chairmakers, in which case it's fantastic. And the Free Trade Party is winning again against the Liberal Party, which won the first two elections. Liberal Party's made of the Intelligentsia, and is that Landowners, I think? It's either that or the Petite Bourgeoisie. I think it's Landowners, though. And he has his first railroad. Ayo. Making too many engines. Yeah, so if there's not enough domestic demand for engines, so they are making no money. They're losing a ton of money. He might be subsidizing it. I don't know if that's what that symbol means. But you just export it to Britain, and then you'll try and get profitable again. And so this seems to be a good way to, if you want to, like, because he only has one of these, and he's producing too many, and so it seems like a good solution. Alright, sugar and cotton go in, fancy steel chairs and trains come out. Or fancy chairs, steel, and trains. Not fancy steel chairs. Let's see, how much fabric? Yeah, he's importing a ton of fabric. And he's importing... Yeah, so sugar as well. I think he should have taken that trade agreement, because he's importing a lot, and it doesn't... I don't see... Most of his exports look like they're not going to the United States. And so... Maybe I'm missing something, though. Maybe he's tariffing the sugar. Maybe he started tariffing the fabric, and he wants to tariff it for profit, rather than making his inputs cheaper. But it's one of the inputs for chairs, so... He's going to enrich... Well, whatever. I don't know why he's doing it. I'm sure he has a reason. I'm just unaware of it. I'm not saying I don't know in the sense that this guy is smooth brain. I'm saying I don't know as in I am unaware. Literacy of 50%, and radicals are going down. Landowners particularly are unhappy. Devout and rural folk as well. He's ranked 25. Even though he started as like just released to New England, it'll be interesting to look through the list at like what other countries start at. This is starting to get a bit long, but we're gonna get through it. Defensive pact with the U.S. That's probably good, especially because France was like saber rattling a little bit early on, but he's trading with France. Maybe France just like wouldn't want to go through in the trouble of like conquering him. Keys. Reminds me of Keynesian? Whatever. Cassius. Alright. Now he's trying to pass laws. See, this law seems like it might pass. Enacting multiculturalism. This is something I really want to do in my Tunis run, because the whole idea is like role-playing as Carthage, and Carthage is very multicultural, but we'll see how that goes. Escalation of the Mexican-American War. Let's see. We want to return Texas and conquer Alabama. And return Utah and subjugate Central America. Okay. And that is the end of that page, so... Just a couple more pages. Have to figure out a way to make a large amount of iron, but profitably. So, why is that the case? Does he want to drive down the price of iron? So iron is a base level input. So I don't know how you drive down the price of iron, because you can't make the inputs for it, except for one of the inputs is wages. Oh wait, he can make the inputs cheaper. So if he makes tools and coal cheaper, right, which ironically you use iron to make coal and tools, that will make the iron cheaper. And then when the iron gets cheaper, it makes the coal and the tools cheaper. And it's like, brrr, it's a revolving door, right? And so how do you make the coal and iron cheaper? Is that the question? Oh, he just talks about the election. But it's interesting to see how many of these, how iron in its loop is feeding back into itself, because you use iron and wood to make tools, and you use, like, I think tools, and I'm not sure what you use for mining. It depends on what level of production. Like, you might be using nitroglycerin as well, but it refeeds back into itself, and so you might want to try and make that cheaper. Whoa, what are we looking at here? Just a landslide election? Okay, the radical part. Oh, Jesus. That's interesting. Did he do that? I'm not sure. Now is multiculturalism. Intelligentsia are happy about it. He had racial segregation before. Marginalism. Oh, interesting that the landowners support it, considering the landowners benefit from slavery? I don't know. Petite bourgeoisie does not like it, and the devout do not like it. Okay. Might start getting a lot of immigrants now. So this might be a way to try and play tall from a small country. And so the question is how do you push the liberal reforms as fast as possible in a small country? And I'm thinking about this from the perspective of Tunis, because I think I'm going to try and do this. And I think it's just, if it's owned by a landowner, you don't build it, the building. So I think that's what I'm going to try. And I just might have just huge issues sourcing some stuff like fabric and iron and wood at the beginning. Started importing dyes, huge drop in the price of clothes. Wow, that is a big drop right there. Here, I'll scroll up so you can see it, because my face might be blocking it now. And standard of living finally starts to climb towards the... And it's all off the back of this fabric getting... See, this is going to be a type of thing where you have to check frequently, like, can I upgrade this? Can I change this? And really kind of be attentive, because this is a huge tick up in standard of living, and when standard of living goes up, immigration's also going to go up. And now he wants to pass universal suffrage. Everyone suffer together. Wait, what? Oh, so he has to pass property to women first? But it says we now have universal suffrage. I'm confused. Oh, women's suffrage is there. Okay, so universal suffrage unlocks rights of women laws, and I'm guessing it gives suffrage to every adult man is given an equal vote. Okay, that makes sense. We inherited our laws from the USA, which surprisingly did not allow women to vote in 1836. Oof. Central America partially reunified. Okay. Warren so I didn't see the number. It was 57 last time from the furniture manufacturers. Let's take a guess at what it is this time. 62? Just 57 again. Okay. But there's more of them, I guess. The 5 capitalists who own every steam engine in the country are making a killing. I'm guessing it's more than the furniture guys, so I guess 62. Nope. It's less. Population of 16, though. That's kind of funny. And we have one more page. We are almost done. Wow. Okay, so this looks like a dick measuring contest between the textile mill and a steel mill. Oh, this is steel mill. 58. This might be the richest pop in the game. It's kind of funny. Should do a multiplayer game to see who has the wealthiest capitalist pop. That'll be interesting. Petty bourgeoisie does not like this reform. British Indochina. Interesting. And he is expanding his train routes. This must be, like, just great fun to watch. Boston is getting fancy. The GDP is 40% of the country. Population's like half. And standard of living is pretty high. Highest standard of living in Upper Canada. And so this is going to pull a lot more pops. But as more pops come, it's going to be harder to feed them and keep the standard of living up, right? And so it might... It's interesting to think that it might be easy to become too overpopulated. And I guess what you do is you just try and... You just gotta build more employment for them. And so you just build more construction centers as the pops, like, move up. And you try and keep them, like, getting food as well. I don't know. Okay. Another migration way is Afro-Caribbean. Do they have gold, or is the Canadian government just incompetent? They make a lot of things their market needs while having little unemployment peasants. Oh, are they just that competent? Because Canada's looks really nice. Interesting. Very little unemployment. So they just keep most of their stuff in-house and manage to do this. So maybe if you have to, like, import a lot of your inputs, it just generally reduces your standard of living because you're paying out to the tariffs, which just increases the prices, which makes it harder for your pops to buy, I guess. He's got 6 states, and he thinks he's done for the day. So this was a bit interesting. You know, it's interesting to see that you can start out releasing a country, which I think that is kind of the big takeaway from this and the Iraq one, which is you don't have to play if you want to play a different country that's not, like, visually available, you can try and play as the country that occupies it and then just release them, like Poland probably being the example that stands out the most, because someone on Reddit today was complaining about there being no Poland, and you just play as Poland, or sorry, you play as Russia, you just release Poland, and then you just play as Poland. And this creates a lot of new options in terms of what you can do, you know, and I'm not going to even try and think about and speculate, like, what plays might be particularly interesting. I think playing the United Kingdom and releasing England, if that's possible, would be funny. Would be quite funny. I'm not sure if that's, this seems like a bit of a meme play, but, see if everything collapses and just trying to recover that and being like, telling everyone, bragging, oh, I played as England, and they're like, oh, England's so strong, and you're like, no, not the UK, played as England. So that might be interesting. Kind of the major takeaway. Also, New England starts out way stronger than Iraq, because the last video I looked at was Iraq, and Iraq did not seem to start out in very good shape. But this has been an interesting sort of thing. As far as discussion goes, is there any releasable nation that someone can think of that they think would be particularly fun, you know, of any of the countries? I can't think of... I think Scotland or England would be really funny, releasing them from the UK. I also often liked playing, like, countries like Brittany in EU4, so maybe if Brittany is a releasable tag from France, that could also be fun and interesting, trying to play as a colonial Brittany. That could be a fun, interesting kind of run. You know, releasing a smaller nation from a lot of these, like, major powers, which is what you have in Vicky, if you're used to trying to play as, like, smaller countries, like from EU4 maybe. And then maybe that could be fun. If you like this video, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube algorithm stuff. If there's any hidden Victoria 3 content out there, please link it in the comments. This is at least pre-Victoria 3 release, because obviously post, I'll just be playing it. And have a good day, and if you haven't gone for a walk, maybe go for a walk today, because that's good for your health. Anyways,